You know, I'll hand it to Dunu for taking risks with their IEMs. Last year they had the DK3001 BD, which was a risky name, but also a pretty risky tuning, especially in the wake of just a lot of popularity around this new meta of tuning philosophy. The brain dance takes a completely different direction, and I ended up loving it. This is the Vulkan 2, however, and what's something different? Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and today we're taking a look at the new Dunu Vulkan 2, which, as the name suggests, there's a 2 in it because there was a previous Vulkan. But this one, like that one, is a hybrid IM. It's got 2 dynamic drivers, 6 balanced armatures, and it's coming in at a price of $360 US. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't love the last Vulkan, the original Vulkan. It was kind of close to actually being something I should have loved, but I didn't really love it. But this one does something that makes me kind of love it even less. And if you want to find out, well, that's what we're going to talk about in this review. But before we get to that, a quick shout out to Hi-Fi Go for sending in the Vulkan 2 for review. If you want to check this IEM out, of course, I'll have it linked in the description down below. But with that said, let's go to the table. We'll talk about what you get inside the box, which is frankly a lot, as per usual with Dunu. Then we'll talk about the build quality, fit, and comfort, and then of course we'll talk about the sound, as well as bring in a couple of other IEMs at this price point for direct comparison. So here you go. Here's the box. It says Vulkan 2 on the outside, which is cool. And what you get inside of it is what you see here. We're going to put the IM to the side as I scatter everything across my table, apparently, and just highlight the accessories. So you do get a very large carry case, which is nice and large. I guess this would work out for a backpack. Definitely is not going to fit into your pockets unless you got much larger pockets than I do. But also on top of that, you also get these little booties to individually protect your earpieces. Not something I personally use, but if you're into protecting your gear, that is nice to include. There is also a nice microfiber towel. And I'm going to say this unironically, Dunu makes like the best microfiber towels. Of all the microfiber towels I have in my house, whether they're from IEM companies or otherwise, the Dunu ones are my favorite. Just really nice material. Apart from that, you do also get a cleaning tool, which is how you know this is a premium IEM. And then you also do get a bunch of ear tips, which is nice to see. They're all silicone ear tips. But there are 4 different styles of silicone ear tips, and they're all going to have slightly different fits, which is nice. That's exactly what I want. I want different ear tips that fit differently so that I can find my ideal fit and then, you know, the sound that comes from that. So just to highlight here, these ones are kind of generic looking. These look like ear tips that you saw with IEMs, I don't know, 5+ years ago. And then these ones are, I've seen these with some other Dunu earphones. They're a little bit more on the bulbous side. They're almost like little balls, which is interesting. So I like that. But then the ear tips that most people are going to be interested in, everyone loves the Dunu SNS tips, which are these ones. I don't really love these. These things look like a ditalini pasta. Is that what it's called? So I call these the Dunulinis. These have never really worked for me, but I know a lot of people really do like them. So it's nice to see those included. But then the ear tips that I do actually prefer generally are the candy ear tips. I think these have been some of my favorite ear tips of the year. I've just been using them a lot on a bunch of different IEMs. So nice to see them included. And they also come with a little individual carry cases, which I dig. Okay, apart from that, there are some accessories to do with the cable, which I guess will get us into talking about the build quality and physical form factor on the IEM itself. So yeah, I guess just to highlight briefly, these tips are swappable. So I can go from a single-ended connector over here to a balanced 4.4 mil connector. This pops off, pops back on, and it's got a threaded retention, which I love to see. It's also really nice and compact. So yeah, fantastic job on this. They do also include a 3.5 to 6.35 millimeter adapter. This is not something I personally would use. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that because I do use these occasionally, just not usually with IEMs. If you needed to plug this thing into like a desktop amplifier, a lot of the times those are 6.35 mil. So it is nice that they have a little adapter included in there, although that does make it, as you can see, a little bit on the longer side, but less of a problem when you're plugging into desktop gear. Apart from that, let's talk about the rest of this cable, which is pretty typical Dunu cable in that super nice material, super premium feeling, but also to some degree maybe a little bit overbuilt. Like it's just a little bit on the stiff side and a little chunky. But overall, I do actually kind of like this cable. I don't know if this is like their Hulk mini cable, something like that. But as you can see, it's a little bit on the thick side. And the behavior on it is a little bit stiff and a little bit memory prone. You can see it can be a little springy at times, but I think this is a cable that works well with heavy earpieces. These earpieces are not particularly heavy, so I don't think it necessarily needs a cable this heavyweight, but I don't know, you certainly can't say that they're cheaping out on the cable, because it's definitely nice materials. You do have a nice small Y-split, which I like to see. You've got a chin slider that mostly stays in place, even if it is just kind of a simple plastic square. And then, of course, that will terminate into preformed ear hooks up top with, in this case, 2-pin connectors, although my understanding is that you can actually order this with either a 2-pin connector or with an MMCX, which is kind of cool. Usually, okay, I don't want to say usually, like basically always when you're buying an IM, you're just stuck with either 2-pin or MMCX per whatever the manufacturer chose. Lately, Dunu's been offering both and giving you the option, which I think is a cool idea. I don't know, yeah, if you want MMCX, you can get it if you want. But personally, I prefer the 2-pin, so there you go. Apart from that, well, you can see that the 2-pin is not recessed, and the 2-pin connector on the cable is protruded. So you do get somewhat of a tall connector situation going on here, but I don't know, I didn't really have any issues in terms of the fit and comfort, so that was good. But that will bring us into talking about the earpieces here on the Vulkan 2, and well, you can see them. They look pretty nice, but if I'm honest, these look a little bit on the generic side, which is interesting because, well, the brain dance that we were talking about earlier, a very distinctive styling of an IM. And even the previous Vulkan, the original Vulkan, also a very distinctive IM that you couldn't mistake for any other IM. This, with the Vulkan 2, this design, this looks kind of generic. I feel like I could just mistake this for any other given IM. So I don't know, I'm not gonna make a big deal about it. You decide whether or not you like the look of it, but it is pretty simple. And I guess, you know, there's something to be said for the simplicity of it, and also kind of like a rose gold, almost like champagne-y color to it, which, I don't know, I dig. Apart from that, as you can see, we're gonna start talking about fit and comfort. Relatively short nozzle. Actually, I would say this is like a kind of perfectly reasonable length nozzle on it. And then let's do a little bit of a measurement here just to see what kind of width we're talking about on this nozzle. It's about 6.3 mil, which is a little bit on the wide side, but that is counting this little lip there. If I count past the lip, it's about 5.5 mil. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a little bit on the wide side in terms of nozzle width. But I'll just say I personally did not have an issue with it, but I guess I also typically don't have an issue with it. It helps that it is, you know, somewhat of a short nozzle. But there you go. This is what it looks like with an ear tip on it. And I guess we can show you what it looks like inside of the ear of a human being, if you can call me that. There you go. So fit and comfort on the Dunu Vulkan 2. I would say that the size-wise, this is like just a kind of run-of-the-mill, medium-sized shell. Soft corners everywhere around, so I don't feel anything on my ear. It's not very form-fitted or anything like that. I don't know if I didn't really highlight that when we were looking at it up close, but you can see like there's not a whole lot of semi-custom molded design to it, so it's not really gonna lock into place. In fact, I would say most of the fit comes from one, just like the back of my concha kind of cradling it, but then also the grip that your ear canal is gonna get on the ear tip. So it is nice that it includes a bunch of different ear tips so you can find which fit works well for you. And yeah, personally, I found that the stock ear tip, which was just this gray one, kind of bulbous and round, worked pretty well for me. So I would say it doesn't feel super secure, and it doesn't feel like it's filling up my ear, but I don't know, kind of like a nice general run-of-the-mill fit for an ear tip or for an earphone in general. So I guess that much I like. Let me just check my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything to talk about. There's not a ton to talk about here with the form factor, so we can start talking about the sound of the IM itself. After I roadie wrap it, we've got it roadie wrapped together, and let's go to Squiglink and take a look at the frequency response of the Vulkan 2. So if you want to take a look at this for yourself, of course, I've got it linked in the description down below. You can compare it to literally hundreds of other IMs that I've measured. But let's do a little bit of an analysis here together. And there's a couple things that stand out. I think, honestly, let's ignore the elephant in the room and just kind of look at this as a relatively neutral tonality. Maybe a little bit relaxed here in kind of like the upper treble region, although, I don't know, it's arguable that this is like actually what neutral treble should sound like or should graph like. You know, we've got somewhat of a natural sort of mid-range forwardness to it. Maybe a little bit of an unevenness here in the treble shows up in the frequency response. I'll say to my ear, this doesn't sound like especially harsh treble or anything like that. It does sound, however, very much mid-range forward in terms of its tonality. And then you can see down here, there is not a lot of bass emphasis, which is actually kind of a nice departure. There's just not a lot of IMs out there that don't have a ton of bass. In fact, let me just highlight this briefly. I didn't notice this until I was setting up the table here. They've got this delicate badge underneath the Dunu logo on the front of the box, which just reminds me that I guess Dunu, they've got the SA series, the studio series, right? The SA6, etc. And then they've also got the Brain Dance, which I think they call like their Hyper series. And so here, the Dunu Vulkan 2, they've fit into this Delicate series, which I haven't seen before, but Delicate is ostensibly how they are describing this sound signature. So it's very much, you know, relatively bass light, mid-range forward, and well, there's this right here, which is kind of a significant dip in the mid-bass region, or maybe you could describe this as lower mid-range. Basically what this is gonna do is just make it sound a little bit thin, actually maybe quite a bit thin, and just really, really bass light. So as little like bass boost as there is here, just note that this dip right here is gonna make it sound even less bassy than maybe you would expect given the modestness of this bass boost. So that's the general frequency response that we are talking about here with the Vulkan 2. So what does it actually sound like to my ears? Some listening impressions. I mean, overall, like honestly, man, I just find that lower mid-range dip a step too far. I like the idea that they're targeting more of a neutral sound signature without a boosted bass. There are not a lot of those IEMs on the market lately, and it's nice to see, but I don't know if they were trying to give it, they were trying to like still have a little bit of a fun bass boost, but then cutting that mid bass to keep it sounding more mid-rangey rather than bassy. But I find that it just really makes the bass sound really unengaging. In fact, with a lot of music, like there were times I would plug these things in my ears and it felt like I didn't have a seal. Like that was the sensation I was getting listening to the Vulkan 2, because there's just like so no bass. And given, you know, different songs are gonna have bass in different sections of the frequency response. If you're listening to music that doesn't have bass below 80 hertz, like you're just not getting bass on this IEM, which I found to be, I don't know, pretty limiting in terms of my enjoyment. Now, the overall tonality is definitely going to be on the brighter, more forward sounding side. It's definitely a mid-rangey sound. It's not, when I say bright, it's not like so much like a sparkling, shimmery bright. It's just bright because it has no bass, basically. More so, I would say that it sounds like more upper mid-range forward, a little bit thin, a little bit light, and yeah, I don't know. I don't love it. Honestly, I'd say the treble, I would say the treble is not like that bad. It's probably the best part of the IEM, but overall, I would say that this sounds to me just kind of unsatisfying and lifeless, which it's not how I like to describe an IEM. Let me bring in a couple of other IEMs for comparison. And just for reference, here is the original Vulkan, which, like I mentioned, I promised this thing was a little bit more exciting and distinctive looking. Do you agree? Like, I think the original Vulkan looked pretty cool, although this one might actually fit me better. But how do these two compare? I would say that the original Vulkan, even though I just described this as very much a mid-range focused sound signature. The mid-range on this sounds fuller, like it has a little bit of a richness to the mid-range, but it also has kind of a dryness to the overall sound. I'd say that the treble in this I find less satisfying than I find the treble on the Vulkan 2, but overall I would say that this is just like more in my wheelhouse. Like this is just kind of a nice, inoffensive sounding IEM that's hard to really point to anything in particular as being like standout or like super exciting, but it'll play everything and it'll sound pretty good. The Vulkan 2, it's definitely going to be a lot pickier with what music sounds good on it. And frankly, more of my music sounds better on the original Vulkan than it does on the Vulkan 2. Another IEM that I think is an interesting comparison is the Moondrop Blessing 3. I think this is interesting because these both have like kind of that lower mid-range scoop out, right? Which you can describe as lower mid-range, you can describe as upper bass. Neither of these are very bassy IEMs, but I will say is that effect is much less prominent on the Blessing 3, which is already like arguably a too thin IEM. So the Vulkan 2 basically takes that a step further and just ends up sounding more mid-rangey overall. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I kind of expected this to sound brighter in comparison to the Blessing 3, but the Blessing 3 does have quite a bit more treble. So even though it has more bass, which is not to say that it has a lot of bass, but it has more bass, I would say that the Blessing 3 actually ends up sounding a little bit brighter overall, and also maybe even a little bit more V-shaped in comparison to the Vulkan 2, which really just sounds very, very mid-range forward, which is like almost like an inverted V, like an inside-out V, convex V. Was that? I don't know. We don't need to keep going down this road. But anyway, yeah, the Blessing 3 is like, again, it's like arguably too thin, but I think it works a lot for a lot of my music, and I enjoy this one. Whereas the Vulkan 2, it just feels like it's a step too far. And it goes not just like past an IM that I really like, which is the Blessing 3. Like, I like this sound. Even though I maybe wouldn't reach for it all the time, I like the sound of the Blessing 3. The Vulkan 2, just like another step past that. And it really just takes it further than you might expect, just a step beyond taking it, if that makes sense. Basically, this is at the edge, and then this is beyond the edge of not that enjoyable. The last IM I wanted to talk about real quickly is this, which is, of course, the Soft Ears Volume S, another hybrid IM, around 300-ish bucks. I guess I forgot to talk about prices. I actually don't know what the price is on this guy now. It used to be 320 bucks. Then there were tariffs, so I'm gonna guess around 360 bucks, so basically similar price to the Vulkan. This one's a little bit cheaper at $320. Fewer drivers if you're keeping count. But in terms of sound, that's gonna be the biggest difference, is that the Volume S is actually just a much fuller, kind of richer sound. It does have more of a bass emphasis, so the bass just has a lot of tactility about it. I guess that's actually a thing I forgot to mention. The bass has a decent tactility here on the Blessing 3 that you just don't get on this. And then the Volume S, has just a lot more tactility. It's a little bit on the mid-bassy side, but man, it's just a really engaging, dynamic sounding IM, the Volume S. And it's still within the range of what I would kind of describe as neutral. Like, all of these are kind of different flavors of something I would call neutral. I wouldn't really describe any of these as V-shaped, or, I mean, again, they're all colored in some way, but they're all within the realm of, you want to listen to your music and you don't want it to sound weird or super over contrast or anything like that. The Volume S doesn't do that. It's still like a nice balanced sound signature, but it's just a whole lot more dynamic, engaging. I feel like it does better with micro texturing. It sounds more atmospheric, whereas again, this just kind of sounds a little bit dull and lifeless. Anything else to talk about? I don't think so. So let's go and wrap up this review. The Dunu Vulkan 2. Again, I gotta hand it to them for taking a risk. And again, I kind of like the idea of this delicate series. Like, I want more IMs that are approaching a different sound signature than just the bassy warm stuff that we get a lot of the times. Unfortunately, the Vulkan 2 just doesn't really work for me, really any of my music. So out of 5 stars, for me, I'm gonna give this 2 stars. It might be better for you. For me, that's what it is. But if you wanna check it out, of course, I'll have it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't yet, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, also linked below, and I'll catch you in the next super review. Cheers.
Join with the force of reviews. We now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get into the future.